Hi, Dr. Routsong. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me? Can you hear me okay?
Yes, okay. I just heard you now.
Oh, okay.
Sorry about the trouble. I know Zoom can be kind of unpredictable sometimes.
Well, normally it works just fine for me, but we just switched over to 10, so I'm thinking that perhaps that had something to do with it.
Yeah, maybe so. And you can choose if you want to use video, you can. You don't have to. That's up to you. So
Oh, okay. Well,
I'm kind of sick right now, so I'm gonna opt to keep my video off. And I apologize if my voice is hard to hear or anything. So
no problems.
well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
That, of course.
Yeah.
Sounds like fun.
Sorry. Go ahead.
I just said it sounds like fun.
Yeah, so this is, I kind of gave you a little background. It's for a class I'm taking. That's the topic of it is integrating technology into the classroom for adult learners. And so, of course, I'm sure you remember you were my advisor in communication studies at Washburn. So, given a little background there to the listeners, but I really enjoyed a lot of the classes I took with you, and I know you did some different creative things. So I really thought it would be fun to get your perspective on different technology.
Ah, fantastic.
So I won't take a lot of your time up today. This should be pretty quick. So I'll just kind of jump in here. And is there anything you wanted to say before we get started?
Not at the moment.
Okay, perfect. Well, in your years of experience teaching, is there anything that comes to mind when you think of integrating technology in the classroom, like a specific example or type of technology that you've used a lot in the past?
I was thinking about this, and I believe that the use of technology, I mean, it can help us creatively find ways to allow students to show us what they know, whether this is through mind mapping, which there are a variety of ways that you can do mind mapping, word clouds. Sometimes you can use things like Poll Everywhere, Kahoot, or just even ways to show our information. So anything from, depends on what you want to call technology, right?
Yeah.
PowerPoint, Prezi, Canva. However, I believe that just like everything else, tech is a tool. So sometimes it's not the most effective. And sometimes that just because it's the latest and the greatest doesn't mean that it's the tool to use. So I always think that we have to be thoughtful to the objective that you're trying to obtain, and then kind of figure out the best approach or the approaches to reach the students to meet those objectives. I guess so. I guess the example, I don't know if that's along the lines of what you're interested in.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense, because one of the things that we talk about a lot is like if you're teaching a class of people who, the average student isn't familiar with technology, it might not be the best learning tool to use something pretty complicated that's going to take a steep learning curve to learn how to use. So, yeah, I think you're definitely on the right track there.
Yeah, and well, I mean, so for example, if I need to know that students have an organizational structure for, say, speeches, should I care that they use the same outlining format that I have, so Roman numerals and alphanumeric, or does it matter that they can demonstrate that they understand the flow and the components of the speech, kind of those high-order concepts? So it might be the difference between outlining and mandating an outline, or allowing something like the mind map, which also can show levels and organizational structure, but it allows for a different way of putting that onto paper.
Yeah.
I sometimes find that I'm learning tech with my students. It changes so fast. And I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that I try not to let my ignorance about technology or about the next thing impede their learning. So one of the examples was it's a video compilation project that my students did. And I didn't want to pretend that I knew all the options out there, or that I even knew all the best ways to go about doing video cutting or anything along those lines. So, I looked up some of the various free versions, so I didn't come with them completely empty-handed or anything, but I just said, play with it. Play with it. Here's where you can start. Use your own devices and use the tech that works with your devices. But then I also made it a really safe opportunity for failure. The objectives of the class were not just on their success of using that technology. That was sort of more about the icing of the outcome. So, and then I made sure there was plenty of flexibility within the results. So how I structured the groups, or if they wanted to go solo, allowing for resubmits, allowing for them to have a part of the learning process be making the mistakes and talking about what they learned from those mistakes. Looking for class experts, who's not necessarily me, or often not me, and just people at the university willing to help with those projects. And that's hard, I think, sometimes for an instructor to relinquish that kind of control and to acknowledge that not only are we not infallible, but that we don't know everything.
Yes,
And,
definitely.
yeah.
That's what's been kind of funny, like with this class, for example. We've used blogs a lot, is like one of the forms of technology that we've been using, and then we're creating a group project using a wiki. And so one of the examples in the book they mentioned is they were like, well, it's probably a good idea to experiment with using these forms of technology if you're ever going to use them in the classroom, because like you're saying, it can be a little overwhelming and uh, intimidating to jump in and use something if you yourself don't, aren't maybe the best at it. And even having experienced it in the, using it yourself, there's still so much to know and so much to learn, and probably students that would be able to, really show you how to do it and show you how it's done. So it's kind of funny. It's just like a big experimentation, I feel like, with a lot of this stuff.
Well, right. And I think that part of that too, I think people learn so much from the acknowledgement about the learning processes of others. So they see students also struggling. They see me, when I struggle, I'm pretty honest about things. So if I'm struggling with something, or I'm having trouble getting something to work, we'll talk about it as a class. Or if everyone seems to be struggling, we'll come back and say, boy, we're missing a piece here. What are we missing? But
yeah, that's so helpful with all the collaboration, and different people are going to have different insights in the class. And sometimes, like you're saying, that like just because you're teaching the class doesn't mean maybe there's somebody else in that class who can speak up and be like, oh, I know all about this. Let me help everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So,
right.
that's awesome. So I think one of the kind of last questions I had for you is if you can think of any specific example you've had in the past. I mean, it can be a success story or a failure story about using some type of technology in the classroom. And I guess you could say there's really not such thing as failure, because you're going to learn something from it, but maybe it didn't go the way that you planned or intended it to at all.
I think the one that I mentioned before, the video compilation. So that was actually a HiSEPS project, a high impact community engagement project. We were working with sort of a local high school, but it was also sort of a community organization to create these. In the end, we were creating one video to show at a 25th anniversary for for a local drumline. And during that project, it was for a research methods class. And so my students went out for the class. They had to interview the individuals and transcribe. And so it was learning how to use that basic technology of just how do you record people, how do you make it so you could hear it and make it quality. But then from there, we had snippets of performances, snippets of everyone else's compilation interviews that they had gathered. And I said, okay, now using a thematic analysis, which is again part of the outcome of the course, I want you to create a compilation video. Make sure you're thinking about the components, and you're thinking of your organization and what their wants and needs are for this to be able to show at a 25th anniversary. So you don't want your theme to be dark and how horrible it is, because that's not the event. And I was really, really impressed, because at the beginning I was very nervous. Almost none. I think I had 5 out of close to 30 students that had any kind of video editing experience at all. And a lot of people had told me they'd never even tried to record on their phones before. And of course, we had this community partner we were also trying to make happy. And so I think that particular one, I was just really proud of them, and to use each other as teaching tools and really work through things. Now, of course, the part of that, I think that it was the greatest teaching success, because I also had to relinquish that control and trust the students were going to get it done. But I also think that there was a part of that there were some struggles to that, in that because I made it a safety net, that, look, if it's the technology part that's tripping you up, here are the actual objectives to the class. I did have, actually, it was one student who ended up just doing kind of the bare minimum, didn't really give it a shot and give it a try. But I kind of feel like 1 out of 30 isn't too bad. Mm-hmm. I've also had an example. So I use things like Kahoot. It's I don't know if you know what that program is. It's kind of a goofy, really easy building a quiz kind of program.
Okay.
It has music, and so my students really like Kahoot. I use it for like pre-reading quizzes. So it comes online, they use their phones, and it charts whether they get the questions right or wrong. Based on how fast they answer, they can earn more or less points. And it gives things like, who's had the biggest streak, who are the top three. It'll rank order everyone and tell them what place they're in. And the students get super competitive about it. It unfortunately worked a little bit too well, perhaps. And that is because they got so into Kahoot that when I was teaching a particular class where I had asked, one of the assignments is to come up with a kinesthetic program, kinesthetic activity for them to do in relation to the course material. That was sort of what I wanted them to do. And they all started using Kahoot. I think the first one used the Kahoot, and then the second one used Kahoot, and then the third and the fourth. And I had been really hoping for a variation in learning styles and activities instead of one reliance on one piece of technology. And so what was unfortunate, and why I'm using this as kind of my failure story, is at the end, I was doing an activity sort of how I had envisioned them to do theirs. And it was more of not quite a role play, but something very similar. And one of my students said, wow, doing this made the concepts make so much more sense. I wish we'd been doing this all along. I'm like, this is what I've been wanting you to do.
You're like, this was the plan.
This was the plan. And so we talked about that a little bit, about the reliance on technology. And we came up with some solutions so that next time, not to say you can't use this technology, because it's not the technology's fault, but do talk about overuse, and maybe only allow one group to sign up to do that, and the next groups have to sign up for something else.
Yeah, I'm interested in this Kahoot now. I'm going to have to check it out. I actually haven't heard of it, so.
Oh, it's Kahooit.
Okay.
I think it's like a Kahoot.it.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I'm going to check that out for sure. Now I'm like really curious.
Yeah, it's super easy. The downside of Kahoot is it doesn't allow for lengthy questions or lengthy answers. So you have to be really succinct. It's great for memory dumping. So if you just want to see if they understand concepts. So I use it as like a pre-reading tool sometimes. So, if they really did the reading, they can tell me some of the basic concepts of it. And if they can't, then I know that when I talk to them that day, or when I focus that day, I really need to hit particular concepts more than others.
Yeah, that's really
so
neat.
It's yeah. Well, I mean, as I said, but I've used other things as well. That's just the example I had that happened just 8 weeks ago with the Kahoot.
Yeah. See, this is why I wanted to talk to you, because I know you're always like doing different things and using different technology, and you're not scared to like try things. It's definitely not like a typical lecture type class at all with you. So I was like, oh, she'll have all kinds of ideas. So.
Yeah. Well, I believe in active learning. That's not to say that conversing, there aren't times where that might be the best approach for the different activities, but I do think that people learn the best by doing. So anytime you can help them do, that tends to be the best.
Yes, I totally agree. Well, I know you were busy, and I think we got through all their questions. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or?
No.
Okay, well, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to finish this project. And like you were talking about, I'm going to jump into a little bit of video editing myself and see how that goes. So
there we go. Well, good luck with that. Let me know if I can help you.
Thank you so much. Bye, Dr. Routsong.
Yeah, bye-bye.